In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 things that I think every training schedule in Football Manager needs to make sure that your team is performing at its best at all times. And I know a lot of people who play Football Manager don't even bother with training and just leave it to their staff and just let their staff control training. And that is perfectly fine. And if you do that, the only thing is I would just make sure that these 3 things are still in your training schedule. I would add that in, let the staff do everything else, but add these 3 things into your training schedule because it will help your team out a lot. So this is kind of the general training schedule and this personal Southampton save I'm doing. But I'm going to go over the schedules and show you guys the different schedules that I have. And I'm going to show you the 3 things that are well apparent in each of these 3 training schedules that I think help to make them successful. So we're going to talk about preseason, talk about in season, and talk about what you guys might want to do before your big important matches, whether this is like a cup final or a big league match that I think will be really helpful. So the first thing that every training schedule should have, and this is if there's one takeaway, I would say this might be the most important, is include recovery sessions in your training schedule. This will be the absolute best thing that you can do to prevent injuries in your save. So I'm going to start off here showing you guys my preseason schedule. And as you can see, my preseason schedule here, there's a lot of physical training. It's very taxing on the players. We can see here that the effort put in all 3 groups is very high, and we do this for 4 straight days. However, I didn't really get any injuries during preseason, and I think that's because I was including these recovery sessions. So we'd have some tough training, we'd include a recovery session at the end of the day. And as you can see here, when I click on recovery session, so if you go down and you go to physical recovery, we can see here injury risk is greatly reduced. The players will see significant reductions in injury risk as a result of this session. So if you're in preseason, including a recovery session after all of those difficult physical days is really going to help making sure that your players are not getting injured during preseason. And now let's talk about in season. And for in season, you absolutely should have recovery sessions again. If you're having a lot of injuries, maybe include more. But my biggest recommendation is after a match, the next day, always include your recovery session. So if you are setting up your own training schedule, you can designate the match day, and the day after the match, always include your recovery session. I usually do it right before the match review. And again, this is you've just had your match, players that are at increased risk and injury at this point, get them into the recovery room, greatly reduce that injury risk, and then you can go back into your normal training schedule. And if you are not setting up your own training, if you just have your staff doing it, that's fantastic. But just go in after the match, stick in that recovery training session, and you will be all set. And just to show you guys, I've had these recovery sessions going all year. Currently, I have no players injured in the save. And if I go to the injury table, going into the injury table currently, these are all the other teams in the league. And I am one of 3 teams in the league with no players injured. And I think a lot of that down is to setting up good training by having those recovery sessions in, because this will help your players not get injured. Now, of course, this isn't gonna, unlike this isn't gonna completely reduce injuries, but this will significantly reduce the number of injuries you have. When I started including recovery training sessions, I definitely noticed there were less injuries, less frequent injuries. So I highly recommend including recovery training sessions, especially around times when you have a really busy schedule. Include those recovery training sessions, and this will help your players not to get injured. So that was tip number 1. Tip number 2 is going to be centered around what I think is one of the most important parts of the game, and that is team cohesion. We're going to talk about club atmosphere a little bit better, but if you go into your dynamics section, team cohesion is absolutely one of the most important parts of the game. And especially if you're just starting your Football Manager save, you're going to find that your team cohesion is pretty low. So this is something that naturally improves as players stay together, but This is something that you definitely want to improve during preseason and make sure that it's high during the season because it's going to improve mental state and it's going to prove how well players perform. So there are different ways to improve team cohesion. So we're going to chat about that here. So as you guys are looking at your schedule, you can actually see the things that improve team cohesion here. So you can see team cohesion increase. So my second tip, include match tactics and always include a match review after games. So you have your match focus. I recommend including a match tactics. If you go into match preparation, match tactics, I recommend including that prior to every match. So it'll improve their tactical familiarity, which will be really important for your team as far as performing well in the game. You get a little bit of improvement in decisions and teamwork. And a big thing here is you are improving team cohesion, which over the course of the season, improving that team cohesion is really good for keeping your players together and having them play well. Additionally, after the match, I definitely recommend also including a match review. I'd always do this after my recovery training session. Again, it's going to improve that tactical familiarity. It's going to give a big boost in team cohesion. These two things together are huge for keeping your team playing well over the course of the season. I always recommend having match tactics right before the match and including a match review the day after. So to show you guys in my preseason schedule, I always schedule my friendlies for Saturday. And then you got your physical during the week. I use the next stand to practice set piece routines and improve that team cohesion, improve that tactical familiarity, which I think is really important in preseason. Then you have the match. Then the next day you have that recovery session. Then again, you have that match review. You're improving tactical familiarity. You're improving team cohesion. And this is really important to help build that base during preseason so that your team is well on its way to winning matches when the regular season comes around. Then, of course, during the season, where they're one game per week, I keep it the exact same way. We look at match tactics before the game. We do our match review after. That keeps things ticking over during the season. So we touched on team cohesion. Now let's talk about how we can use our training to improve club atmosphere. And I think this is one of the best things that you can do if you're in a bad run, if this club atmosphere is going down. This is the best thing that you can do to help your team. So my third tip is include a team bonding session. This is probably the recovery sessions. These are the biggest things to include if you have your staff controlling your training. Because I essentially never see recovery or team bonding sessions if you just give it to your staff. And I think this is one of the most important things you can do, especially if you're just beginning a save or if you're a beginner at Football Manager. Include team bonding. And the reason that you should do that, it's under extracurricular. Happiness greatly increase. Players will see significant increases in happiness. This is huge for your club atmosphere. It also improves your team cohesion. So you get the double whammy. You're improving your team cohesion. You're improving your happiness. This is the best thing that you can do after a match, I think. So every time after a match, I have a recovery session, I do a match review, I have a team bonding. You're lowering injury risk, you're improving team cohesion, and you're increasing their happiness. So if they've just won a game, you're getting an even bigger boost in team happiness. If they've just lost, you're helping them to overcome that loss. This is huge. If you're in a rut, if you're in a bad run of form, make sure that you're including team bonding. You can have one team bonding per week. I make sure that I have one team bonding every week. It helps to improve that club atmosphere. It helps the players to be happy. And if your players are happy, you're going to play well. And if you're playing well, you're going to win games. So I also think team bonding is especially important in preseason because we look at endurance. You need to do this physical training, obviously, in preseason to help prepare your players for the physical rigors of the regular season. And we can see that happiness is slightly reduced. So how do we overcome that slightly reduced happiness in all these physical training sessions? Well, we go to recovery, we get a slight increase in happiness, we get a greatly reduced injury risk, and we make sure we add in that team bonding. That team bonding is going to greatly increase happiness, and then we move into that during the season. And during the season, I include that team bonding right after the match. It's just an easy place to put it. And it is really going to help improve your club atmosphere. So if your club atmosphere isn't good, if really early in the season you're trying to improve team cohesion and improve that club atmosphere, throw in a team bonding, throw in some match tactics and match reviews. It'll help a lot. And then the last thing I want to touch on, so this is for a normal week, and then I showed you my preseason. I also do want to show you what I do prior to important matches. And I only do this before important matches. So the big thing here is, so this is my schedule before important matches. Because this is more important than ever to make sure players don't go injured. I do have my normal days where I have regular training, but during that time, I make sure to improve. I throw in those recovery sessions just to be safe. I, of course, practice my set pace routines and penalties. I do my match tactics. I do my match review. The only difference here is instead of having the team bonding session after the match, I do the team bonding session before the match. This gives them a boost of happiness and team cohesion right before the important match because it can't hurt to have, an improved club atmosphere and improved team cohesion right before a cup final or something like that. So I do throw in my team bonding before an important match because that will probably help them to play better. You could probably also throw it before a match just for like regular training, but I like to include more training sessions during the regular season or before regular matches. So this is why I only do this before important matches. So those are the three things that I think every training schedule should have in Football Manager. So even if you're just having your staff do your schedule, do your training schedule before you take control of training. I recommend manually going in, throwing in the match tactics, throwing in match reviews, but definitely 100% throw in a recovery session, throw in a team bonding. You'll greatly reduce your injury risk, reduce the number of injuries your squad has. You'll improve the team cohesion. You will improve the club atmosphere. And I think, if anything, the team bonding and the recovery are the two most important things you should have. And if you want a more in-depth look at training schedules, I highly recommend training schedule videos from Evidence-Based FM and the Zealand training schedules and like the YouTube tutorials. I highly recommend them. They're absolutely phenomenal. But for the nitty-gritty, if you're still here and you really want some nitty-gritty training stuff, I wanted to add a couple more things that I think are fantastic if you are setting up your own training schedules. So first is the play from the back. I think the play from the back is one of the best things that you can include, especially with most people trying to play out of the back in Football Manager if you have a better team. One, I think it has great attributes that it looks at. But two, I think it's a great thing to include under any kind of possession day because it increases happiness pretty significantly. Most other types of training will just have slight increases in happiness, but as far as your outfield players are concerned, this is one of the few that sees a pretty significant increase for both defensive and attacking players. So I always recommend including play from the back in anything that you're doing. A lot of people will also throw in an overall. I think overall and outfield are great, but as you can see, that also only slightly increases happiness and team cohesion. This is where I think attacking and defending is really great because we see kind of bigger increases for attackers and defenders. So I always try to throw in attacking and defending during the week. And the last thing I always recommend is if you're in an international break or you don't have a match this week, throw in a match practice. Because if you throw in a match practice, it greatly increases happiness, greatly increases team cohesion and sharpness. This is a great thing to include in the preseason. If you're going to include a match practice, though, I like to actually include the match practice as the earliest point of the day. And if that happens, then I'll throw in some recovery sessions right after just to ensure that people aren't getting injured. Because if we go to match practice, it does significantly increase their injury risk. So let's drop that down right afterwards by throwing in some recovery sessions. So these are the big things. That's the nitty gritty of training schedules. That's everything I've got. So the three things that I would include in every training schedule, again, recovery sessions, match tactics and match reviews, and team bonding. Even if your staff is handling your training sessions, I highly recommend including those. But we also went over a little bit of the nitty gritty. So I hope that you found this kind of training tutorial helpful. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And I hope your Football Manager 2024 saves are going fantastically well. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.